So you may be asked to provide your bid in various bound sections, a technical section, a management section, a financial section, certifications. Again, this is all outlining to follow what exactly how it says to bid. They may separate out the bids into different sections, follow their instructions and do that. Okay. So in your technical section, you're going to describe the situation, the need for the project, your objectives, your work plan. This is just some ideas of information that you would include in your technical section. Again, it's going to be different for every single one. Fill everything out to as fulsome as you can. What we find a lot of times with companies is that they'll provide a lot of information about certain things, and then in other places they're very sparse in what they provide. I would give everything, all the information that you can provide to us. Better we can evaluate your bid. Okay, so now I'm getting to the part here that's about, hold on. I'm going to skip ahead here a bit because I want to get to the part that is about, we talked about submitting bid evaluation. This is the part I want. Okay, so bid evaluation is an important thing to talk about. The bid evaluation will be outlined in the solicitation documents, but there's different types of ones that we have. So let's talk about a few of them that we have. We're always looking for best value of taxpayers' money. And so that's an important thing to think of. So evaluation criteria are established in advance, taking into consideration such details as time, quality, and cost. Bids are normally evaluated on the technical merit and the best value and overall best value. So to ensure fairness, financial information is assessed separately from the technical information. So we're not looking at your technical and your price at the same time. We're looking at your technical and we're looking at your price. And each one of those are going to be given certain amounts of points, and then it's combined. We're not comparing your technical ability and your price at the same time. They're evaluated separately. Okay. So you have to have all mandatory requirements, as I mentioned before. That's immediately, if you meet everything but one, you're going to be immediately disqualified. So you have to meet all mandatory requirements. I think that's all it says. Oh, some examples of mandatory requirements. Here you go. They may include accessibility features. They might include the bidder's financial stability, essential performance characteristics of equipment, performance specifications related to services, mandatory delivery times due to operational requirements, health and security plan, or the holding of specific licenses. Those are examples of different mandatory requirements that could be included. Point rated criteria. So the point rated evaluation criteria can be used to establish minimum requirements. So they'll have a passing mark that they'll say you must meet this mark, the minimum points that must be achieved, and then the maximum points that can be achieved for each criteria. And that will be outlined in the solicitation document. Point rated criteria are used to evaluate various elements of the technical bid. Evaluation teams use point rated criteria to evaluate the value added factors over and above the mandatory requirements. So the value added criteria could include things like the strategy, the organization's principles, their methodology, the company, their team, their experience, facilities that you have, equipment that you use. These are all types of things that could be used as over and above the mandatory requirements to give you extra points. Selection of a successful bidder. So this is an important thing to think about when you're thinking about evaluation criteria. One of these three are likely to be noted in the solicitation document, that we're going to be going with one of these evaluation criterias. So the simple one is lowest price responsive bid. So you meet all the mandatory requirements. After that, it's lowest price. And for a lot of our goods specifically, it will just be lowest price because we're looking for an item. We know what the item is and who can provide it to us cheapest. So that would be noticed if we're going through lowest price. Best overall value would be if it's done by point, and we're going to look at a point system here on the next slide. But that would be a combination of the technical value and the price equals a best value number. And then highest technical bid within a stipulated budget. So we might say, okay, we have 500,000 for this project. Whichever company comes in under 500,000 and has the highest technical score, they're winning. So that means we really want the best technical score, but not over a certain amount of money. So those are the three most common ways to select or evaluate a bid.
So Jonathan,
Yep.
Going back to the technical part, is there sometimes in those bids a testing phase, meaning that people will answer to the bid and are invited to submit a piece of equipment? The piece of equipment is tested for a while, and then after and only after that testing period, the bid is awarded. I mean, the contract
Yep.
is awarded.
That's possible. They could that could be something that could be included in there. Absolutely. It maybe not, depends on each process, but they may ask you to submit an example. They may ask for it to be tested, or they may ask for like evaluation of previous testing, or if it's been certified, or various different things that they may ask for. All of those are possible, but again, it would all be noted in the solicitation document. Okay, so basis of selection. So here's an example of a certain process. So we're going to think about it here and show for three different examples of how the winner would be chosen. So we have company A, B, C, D here. We've got a technical score. And like this would be detailed as to what the technical requirements are in the actual solicitation. But there's a minimum score of 26.3, a maximum of 35. So 35 points available. But if you don't get a score of 26.3 in the technical, you are immediately non-responsive. So you can see example here, company C only scored 23 on their technical. We're not evaluating anything more. It's over. They've not met the technical score. So execution, they've same thing, minimum, maximum. They have team, so it might say, who's on the team or things like that. Minimum, maximum, and things related to the company. So we get a score. Everybody gets a score for each category. If you meet the minimum for all four, so A and B have both met the minimum threshold for all four of these, so they get to be included and they get a score. The others were non-responsive in the others were non-responsive in two categories, so immediately we stop evaluating the rest of the process. It's not even evaluated and they're deemed not responsive. So, and prices are quoted here. So if we did here lowest price responsive bid, B wins because they've put a price of 440,000 and they've met all the criteria. So lowest price is company B. If we go lowest cost per point responsive bid, it's company A because company A has a higher score than company B. Their price was also more. However, when we do a price per point, cost per point, theirs is a cheaper cost per point than company B was. So if we deemed that the lowest cost per point was the evaluation method in the solicitation document, then company A is going to win at this time. Highest responsive combined rating of technical merit and price was company B. And there's also highest rated technical bid with a stipulated budget was company A. So if we say that the budget was a maximum of 475,000, we can't go over that. Well, company A wins, even though company B had a lower price. Company A wins because their technical score was higher, 32. So those are examples of how we may evaluate bids and how it can look differently depending on what the method of selection is quoted. But again, how we evaluate these different things is going to be well documented in the solicitation document. Okay. Frequent reasons for non-responsive bids. So mandatory requirements are not met, minimum required points are not achieved, the bid is too expensive for the level of funding for the project, or mandatory documentation is not included. So that is common. All right, we're pushing ahead here. I've got a few more slides. I'm not sure how you folks are doing for time, but I think I've got about 5 to 10 more slides here that I'd briefly go through if you're still good. Okay. Had lots of good questions today, so we've had good discussion. How can I follow up? Debriefing can be done in person, by telephone, or writing. So you can contact the contracting authority and they can give you a debriefing. What they give you in the debriefing may vary, but you can request a debriefing from that. And you can make a complaint. So if there has been something unfair that has happened, or you think that there has been a problem in the process, we have the Office of the Procurement Ombudsman in Canada and the Canadian International Trade Tribunal, the CITT, and there are complaints that go to there. And there's a full team at my team that has dealt with, I don't want to say defending, but they're on our side, kind of representing our side at that tribunal of lawyers. And then there are people that make complaints, and then somebody makes a ruling and says whether there was wrongdoing or not. So that is all very, very transparent. Again, this is all stuff we've gone over already, but we just really drive it home because it is important, as Jan mentioned, to read everything carefully, meet all the mandatory criteria, respond to all sections regardless of the point value. So that is a good point here. Sometimes people will focus more on one section or the other because of the points there are more points awarded to a certain section, but you saw in my evaluation criteria that you have to meet the threshold in every section. So putting your focus on one versus another doesn't necessarily get you anywhere if you're not responsive in one category. Okay. These are shoulds, some good advice. Organize it, have somebody look over it. I don't know if that's on here, but review it, edit, write an executive summary, put your business logo. All of these are good things that you can think about. All right, now the fun part, contract award and payment, when you get your money. So we talked about this a little bit. There's no mechanism for payment by the government unless there is a contract in place. So don't start working unless you have a contract. Not that you would, but that is an important thing with government. Never start until you have an actual contract in place. The government's not accountable for paying any work that's happened before a signature of an agreement. So that's important to note. We do use purchase orders for purchases under 25,000. It simply can go through a purchase order that we can put out. And so we can purchase a good directly from you via purchase order under 25,000. And as I mentioned to Marta, we have 30 days following the receipt of an invoice or receipt of the goods or services, whichever is later, to issue the payment before interest starts to accrue. Government acquisition cards are issued. So we do have government credit cards that can be used for smaller dollar value procurement. That is a possibility. And government uses direct deposit. So we would deposit directed to a bank account.
Jonathan, I have two
Yeah.
questions here.
Sure.
So the first one, when it comes to contracts, are the contracts always issued by the government, and the government therefore supports all the legal part behind the contract, meaning that they will have it stated, or is it sometimes the responsibility of the company to provide with a contract?
No, we would provide the contract. We have contracting folks that would write the contract. And of course, the Government of Canada has a Department of Justice, so we have Government of Canada lawyers that are involved in that. And so no, you don't. That's part of the whole thing where you don't get to set the terms and conditions. We will give you a contract with all the terms and conditions, and you either accept that or you don't accept it. That's kind of how the process works.
Yeah. And my other question, and we talked about it on Tuesday, in terms of the currency, we're talking about euro versus Canadian dollars, and who's supporting the exchange rate risk, for example.
Yep.
What's your take on that?
The payment is in Canadian dollars, so that would be up to you to pay Canada and Canadian dollars. I'm not really sure if there's any other consideration to think about that. I mean, the exchange rate can change, obviously, but whatever the price is going to be noted in Canadian dollars, not in euros. So if you agree to pay a certain amount of Canadian dollars, when you go to pay, you have to pay that many Canadian dollars, whatever they are at that time, and that can fluctuate. But the agreement will always be in Canadian dollars.
But we can. My question was also the one that I made to Jan, that is there any mandatory obligation to have a bank account in Canada, or the European companies can have use their bank accounts that they are usually in Europe?
I'm not positive on that, but I do believe, I don't think you have to have a Canadian bank account to be able to pay. I think you can pay through, but that would be a good question to ask if you were to get into a contract, because at that time it may be possible for you to be able to even open up a Canadian bank account without being.
But to open the Canadian bank account, we need to be registered in Canada, I suppose.
You registered there, yes,
or
and you have to have
subsidiary there or whatever.
I don't know if you have to have a subsidiary specifically.
Yes, you do.
You do?
You
okay,
do.
there you go. Well, in that case, you'd have to have a subsidiary. But we contract for many international businesses all of the time that do not have a Canadian presence.
Okay.
So in that, I know that there is a way for you to pay without being like, we have many examples of things. The one I always use is our material for our RCMP buildings are from Belgium because they're fire retardant. You can't burn down a police station. And it's the only place in the world that makes that. So we buy it from them, and we buy all our stuff from them. So they're not incorporated in Canada, and so they're paying us somehow. And I assume that that's through their own accounts. It's just the amount would be in Canadian dollars. So you'd probably have to figure out the exchange rate when you're paying, and then pay the appropriate amount of euros based on the exchange rate.
Okay.
Okay. Security clearance. So security clearance is often required to do business with the government of Canada. We have a wide variety of security clearance. A lot of the clearance that might be required will be reliability level, which is a low level of security clearance that's required. Higher security clearance is required most times when you need to access either a site or data. So if you need to get on the site to install the things that you're doing, you may require a higher security screening to get on site. Or if you need to have access to employees' data or something for the service that you offer, say, you may have to have a higher security clearance. Whatever the security requirement is, it'll be in that section that we looked at in the bid solicitation on security requirements. And then there is a whole team that does contract security programs. So anytime I get any questions about security, I refer to our contract security program. They can assist you with it. It's a similar security pre-screening process that may happen in other countries. Police record check, a credit check, a criminal record check, that kind of thing.
And Jonathan, I have a related question to that. So now let's say one of the European company wins a contract and needs to come to do the installation. Because you win a contract is awarded by the federal government, does that automatically give you the working permit, working visa for your team to come and install, or it's a different procedure that you have to look at?
I think you would have to do that independently. You'd have to work on that visa or anything like that to have people. That would probably all be stipulated in the solicitation documents, and that would be a requirement you'd have to overcome. To like, if it says in the requirement that somebody has to come and install the product, well, the document's not being written for necessarily a European business. It could be a Canadian business that's responding to it. So getting somebody there to do it, having the security requirements, having the visa, all that stuff would be on your end that you would have to figure out in order to meet that mandatory requirement. Unless in the solicitation it says, we're going to, for this process, because we recognize that we're going to be bringing in international workers or something, that we've set up such and such a process, but that would be very, very, very rare. I think any of those requirements would have to be overcome by your organization. Now, in getting a visa, I'm sure having a Canadian contract or things like that would assist you in getting a visa that's required to come to Canada. If you were doing business with the government of Canada, I'm sure that would be a helpful matter in obtaining a visa. But it's not us that would offer that, right? Often people will look at, they'll say, oh, the Canadian government does this, and we act as a bunch of departments. So Immigration and Refugees and Citizenship Canada would be in charge of that and would offer that.
If I may, and just maybe to share that, because it was a bit of a crazy project that we had. So there's a company, a European company, Alcatel, not to name them. They won a contract to lay some submarine cable in the Hudson Bay, or the James Bay, James, one of the two, doesn't matter. So they had to bring a boat from Europe with a crew to lay down that underwater cable. But on that boat, on those boats, you have people from all over the world: Indonesia, Malaysia, Europe, depending on what they're doing. Some people are cooks, some people are engineers. So you have all type of profile and everything. And it was a bit crazy because we had to get a working visa for every single person on that boat because they were entering the Canadian waters. And so that's something always to keep in mind. I mean, here it was to a crazy extent because we're talking about 100 people with, I think, 85 different nationalities, something like that. It was just insane.
It's complicated.
Yeah, but yeah, that's something to keep in mind for everybody. I just have a couple of examples of some of your colleagues from different clusters in Europe. Someone is a leader of a cluster in Belgium, but she's a Chinese citizen. So even though she's been in Belgium for years, she's still a Chinese citizen. And she asked for a permit back in June to come here for 1 week to do some B2B meetings. And we are less than a month away from a travel plan, and she still didn't get it. So I just want to talk about it very briefly because companies sometimes in Europe, they have some workforce coming from all over the world. They are European resident, but they're not always European citizen. And so if you're planning on those people to come and make the installation in Canada because you want a contract, you better make sure that everybody on your team has the working permit to be able to do that and is able to get the visa. Right now, for someone from China, it's 120 days, I believe. Someone from Morocco, it's like 140 days. Someone from Argentina, it's 90 days. So it's all over the place, but that's something you have to take into account if you're ready to send a crew to Canada to do the installation of anything, but even more if it's a federal contract.
Yes, those are good points. And I have read anecdotally stories of people being turned away at the border because they've had either a criminal record or something in the past and they were unable to get through. And from our perspective, all of those government departments are very independent of each other. So Immigration and Canada Border Services are doing their thing and they're going to apply their rule strictly to everybody. And that's kind of how it works. So we can't really control how they're going to be treated at the border, or when they're going to come. So meeting the mandatory requirements includes make sure that you can get everybody to Canada in order to install or whatever requirements are necessary. Those are good points. But if you do ever have questions about the security program, this is their information. You can always ask me later. I can share with Jan after this presentation a few of these notes for these presentations. I don't have the exact presentation I did today for you because I compiled a bunch of them, but we have notes for all of the presentations we give, and I'll share those with Jan, and you can distribute them in order to have all this contact information and other information. Okay, we're almost there. So lastly, Procurement Assistance Canada, we're here to help businesses. So do feel free to contact us if you have some information you're looking for. We are regionally regionally spread across Canada. And so I'm going to share this with you. This is our map of Canada. So I am over here in Nova Scotia at the edge here in Halifax. In the Atlantic region. So like I mentioned, there's a team of us across Canada. So what might be of interest to you if you're looking at a particular opportunity and it's located in one of these different regions of Canada, is you can contact Procurement Assistance Canada in those regions to give you some information. They're not going to necessarily give you information about a specific tender, but they can give you information about the region, the departments that are there, what types of things they might purchase and things like that. I'm well aware of the departments that are here in our region. So I work a lot in defense, security, marine, ocean type things and big sectors that we have here. But the folks in Quebec or in Ontario will be more aware of their markets in those larger cities as well. So they're available for you. We meet one-on-one with businesses. We do these webinars. We answer questions to help kind of bridge the gap a bit. So that's all the information I have to share with you today. I know it's a lot. I often call myself a fire hose of information. I just give a lot of information to people. Procurement in Canada is complicated, as it is in many countries. However, there are a lot of opportunities here. And for international companies, there are a lot of opportunities. There is work for you to do, and in order to navigate those and to find where are the opportunities for you. I would suggest to you to don't be afraid of some of those barriers that I've mentioned. Yes, we have Canadian content policies. Yes, we have different things that make it tricky for you, but also there are other opportunities that there are companies that are getting in and they're doing business here in Canada, many international companies. So it's about finding that niche, about where you can get in to do business, whether that's through low dollar value contracts or by bidding on large contracts. There's different ways to get into the Canadian market. So and if you have any other further questions, I'm happy to stay on for a bit and answer a few questions to you, but that's all the information I had to share with you today. Well, thanks for your interest in Canada. We'd love to welcome you folks to Canada anytime that you're visiting, and happy to have you do business with our government.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think we'll be visiting in summertime, not before.
Yeah, that's I understand. I understand.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was a lot of help. Thank you.
Good. Excellent.
Can I ask Jonathan just a question, an opinion to you and also to Jan, if possible, about our goal in our Extra Light project to create a database of all the more interesting deals, public procurement for our companies. So do you think that it will be useful and easy to create and manage, or do you have some suggestions to ask for these activities in the project?
So you're looking to, can you repeat that again? You're looking to create like a directory of procurement opportunities, is that it? Or list of opportunities, or?
Yeah, database.
Database.
Collecting all the opportunities that the SMEs can attend to. So an easy way to reach all the most interesting tenders. So you think that it will be possible and useful? I mean, have any suggestion, because we are creating this database?
Yes, absolutely. And I see that created. So for example, a lot of associations do that. Like one I have the Canadian Shipbuilding Association. So what they do is they go on our site and they're pulling all of the tenders from our site that are related to shipbuilding, and they put them out in their newsletter every couple of weeks. And it's another avenue. You're certainly welcome to use the information that's there. The Canada Buys website has all of the tenders that are posted. So everything that's competitive for competitive procurement. So I would suggest setting up alerts, setting up the email alerts, sending to you about specific commodities, and you can feel free to compile that information and present it any way you wish to your members or to businesses. If that makes it easier to kind of highlight, instead of going in and doing the search everybody, you can kind of say, here's a pull from the search tool that we've put together for you. That is common that businesses or associations will do that.
And do you publish, or do you plan to publish? Because when we are speaking about the Buy Canada, when regarding the filters, I saw only open, closed. Do you plan to publish some pre-announcements? I don't know if it's
Like a notice.
because
Yeah,
it's like a
in the
notice that on the upcoming tender, because I was
Yes.
scrolling down and the most of the tenders that I've seen was like 1 month time for the presentation, they're very short. So when we'll start to understand, then it's already
Yes.
gone. I don't know, is there an option to have also the, let's say, the pre-announcement that, okay, there is this kind of tenders in preparation?
Yes, and they don't always put them out. It depends on every process, but what you'll see in the filters is for a notice of proposed procurement, an NPP, notice of proposed procurement. So they will put those out. They'll say, heads up, there's a procurement that's coming up. It'll be a large project in whatever sector. And then you'll see on Canada Buys will be a notice of proposed procurement. So if you had an alert set up for lighting and then there was a notice of procurement that was related to that, you would get fed that notice as well.
Okay, thank you. I have also one question, very specific. If you can showcase us this indigenous business register.
Yes.
Because if this can be one of the possibilities to enter in cooperation.
I can give you the link to it here. I'll send you the link. I can't present to you, as I'm not the owner of the thing, but I can.
No, just to show, yeah, show it.
Yeah,
like
absolutely. Let me get it here. Indigenous directory. Get it open for you. Just have to get it open here. Hold on. Here's a link. There's a link on that page for Indigenous search.
Okay, so then I search the Indigenous business. Okay.
Oh yeah, here's this. That's the actual search one there. So that's a search. There's also, you can get to a list of them there. I just have to, there's a link within that page I gave you that you can just get to a list of all of them. They'll list them down for you. Yeah, and like I said, there more and more are going to be added there. Like we're in a big campaign right now going out to Indigenous business to try to get them into this directory. So know that it's going to continue to grow more and more as time goes on.
Okay, and this is like verified, so this is registered and confirmed.
Yes.
Okay.
This is the Canadian government, so the department that runs this, and you'll see there's contact information for them at the bottom. You can contact them. It's Indigenous Services Canada. That's our federal department that delivers services to Indigenous Canadians.
Okay.
So they are doing a verified process to verify that a business is Indigenous or not, and they're putting them on this directory. For now, that's the way we're going to do things. I don't know what the direction in the future will be, but I've heard from a lot of Indigenous communities myself, and their desire often is to own the directory themselves, so that they determine who is an Indigenous business and not the Canadian government. So keep an eye out for that. You may next year, year later, you may find changes. I'm sure it will be well published that there are changes to the Indigenous business directory, but for now, it remains the Canadian government to determine if a business is Indigenous or not.
Okay, thank you.
And just for education purposes, if you're looking to look into Indigenous business in Canada, we have 3 main Indigenous groups in Canada. There are First Nations people, and then we also have the Inuit that live in the north.
Yeah.
And then we also have Métis people, which is specific to Canada. Métis are Canadians who are of mixed French and Indigenous origin. So many Indigenous people mixed with the French population, specifically out in Western Canada, and we call them Métis. So those are the 3 main groups, although every nation has their own leadership and has their own band council, but so how we negotiate with different or how we interact with different communities can be different. So having that awareness will help you when working with Indigenous people.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I see a great opportunity there for the European company to considering working with Indigenous companies, Canadian companies. But I think, as you just mentioned, Jonathan, you have to be careful and you have to understand how those communities are working. It's not just a super easy process where you approach someone and you say, hey, maybe we have a chance if we bid together. I'm not sure that will fall very well. It has to be a bit of a different approach, and I would suggest that people read about how doing business with indigenous people before they start approaching them, because it's first of all a touchy subject here in Canada, and yeah, it's not business as usual. It's a bit different.
That is very good advice, Jan, and it's the same from my perspective for a government person. When government or when business goes directly to Indigenous people, there is often a reluctance right off, because that has happened throughout existence. Many governments have gone to Indigenous people and promised many things for many years, and it didn't necessarily pay out. So there is a reluctance for people that just come out of nowhere and say, hey, I'm gonna work with you. You have to build a relationship, and it's the same with government. When I go to these events, I go and I build relationships with Indigenous people before suggesting to do work with them. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
hard. It's not easy to do it, but that's where I would suggest your opportunities when you come to Canada.
And do they take part in the trade fairs,
Yes.
conferences? Okay. So
Definitely. And another way to do it is to get in touch with their organization. So instead of targeting an Indigenous business specific, is you can
Yeah.
go to the organization. So like across Canada, there would be different organizations, but in my area, we have an organization that represents all First Nations people and helps them with different things. So if I were to go out and give a webinar, I would contact that organization to say, I'd like to deliver a webinar to the Indigenous communities, and then I'd work with them, and then they would connect me. That would be
Okay.
more successful than going directly to a business and saying, hey, come to my webinar. They may be more, we have to have a partnership. They have to trust that they're going to get something out of this and that we're not just wasting their time. So that's an important bit. So yes, if you come to trade shows, that would be a way to do it. But if you were to come and do a mission to Canada and
Yeah.
do and visit, it may be worth it to contact some of the Indigenous organizations, the bigger organizations in your
Yeah.
area, and say, we're coming, we'd like to meet some businesses, and they may be able to set up a time for you to say, okay, let's have a sit down and talk with, like, that might be a format to be able to work with them.
Because we are going to organize, let's call it high level mission. So in first place, we'll organize the missions for the cluster managers. So it will be like European lighting and furniture clusters coming, and not the single companies. So it's more, let's say, diplomatic and business, let's say, fact-finding mission. And with ELCA, that is also a meta cluster. So we are a European association of the lighting clusters.
Okay.
So yeah, it might have sense. So we are representing the cluster organizations, let's say the districts, but there will not be the specific companies that are coming. Okay, I want to do the business with you, but we can use this to set the first relations and see how it can go further.
Definitely,
Okay.
that would be a good way to go in that regard. Now, you mentioned furniture. I'm going to raise that because I would say of all commodities that Indigenous people offer to Canada, furniture is the number one. So office furniture, if you go into a Canadian government business, certainly in here in Halifax, or a Canadian government office in Halifax, most of that furniture is provided by Indigenous business. It's a specific field that they've really gotten into and are really well developed. So that particular industry, and furniture and lighting, they can kind of go together in a lot of ways. So there is opportunity there. There's a large company here in Nova Scotia that does our furniture. It's a Mi'kmaq from the Mi'kmaq Nation that does our office furniture, and that's the case across the country. There's a lot of those opportunities, so that may be something that you might be interested in doing a joint project with them. We often have big furniture projects where we're looking to furnish, do a whole building, and if you were to work with an Indigenous business to provide that, that would be a big plus to winning a contract potentially. So I think there are opportunities specifically in the furniture sector, and you may want to, even when you reach out to organizations, is to say that this is what we're working in, and we'd like to meet some Indigenous businesses that are working in the furniture industry or things like that, and I think that might be a good match.
Okay, no, thank you for this tip, because it was, just thinking louder, but it comes while brainstorming. So yes, the furniture is, let's say, the main sector. The lighting is the part of furniture. So we are, let's say, connected automatically with different. Building is a bigger, let's say, segment that of course included all the lighting. It's more, I think it's more difficult to reach because most of the building or construction tenders, I don't know if they have some specific sub tenders for lighting or not, but furniture usually includes all of them. So
Yep.
yeah.
In regards to that, probably a lot of the stuff that you will be interested in would be working with companies that win the tender, to be honest. Like for that example I gave to you in Moncton, like if you go through the contract history and you see that Pomerleau is building this large building in Moncton, well, now it's up to you to contact Pomerleau and say, hey, do you have anybody providing the lighting for that building yet? Or do you, and the Canadian government is not involved with that. Now that Pomerleau has won that, it's up to them. If you come to us with a joint venture, that's a different story.
To enter the tender as subcontractors mainly.
Yes, exactly.
This is one of the ways that we are considering, of course, because it's, let's say, it's from some point of view easier.
It is, and I think that's a good way for you to target it, because again, it's going to be hard for you to respond to a tender that construction entire building, but for certain elements, absolutely. And the businesses, I'm sure, would be interested in hearing from you in that regard to get into their supply chain.
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Jan.
Any other points for me today? You're a very engaged group. I have to say, I give lots of presentations to many Canadians, and I don't know that I've had such an engaged group yet. So I appreciate your questions and your things like that. It makes it go easier. So thank you.
Thanks to you.
All right.
Okay, well, I guess if there is no more question, we'll thank you very much, Jonathan.
I think that we have Alberto, but we don't hear you.
Oh, somebody. Oh, I hear someone now.
Okay. No, I question that already maybe discussed with Jan. It was a couple of days ago, and it's related to how we can have a good coverage for the tenders, because okay, Canada buys is quite large collection related to government, and just have a look that you have many schools and other kind of contractors that put their tenders in this portal, but it's not covered completely what is running in Canada. So my question is that if, in your opinion, if we follow the Canada buys portal plus the 10 portals of province, the 3 portals of territories, and 4 cities, could be Halifax, that they have their own portal, Montreal and Toronto, we discussed with Jan. It could be we cover maybe 90% of all the tenders in Canada. Do you agree about this vision?
In the future, yes, that is where we're moving. Every day that I go on there, I'm seeing more things that are appearing on Canada Buys. So I wouldn't state that all municipal, like city governments or provincial governments, are all on there yet. Someday they will be, but they all do their own thing, right? We're just reposting their opportunities if they choose to use our service or not. So if you see a city that's on there, they're on there. And if you don't see another city, they're not there yet. And maybe they will be someday. But the idea is the provinces should be there someday. The all Canadian provinces. I wouldn't trust it yet to have everything on there. I would trust that it has everything for the government of Canada. For the federal government, all tender opportunities are there. For the other governments, you can use it for your awareness to push you tenders. That's excellent. But I don't know that I would trust it to have everything, at least not yet. So if you want to look elsewhere on those other platforms to search, it's not a bad idea. But Canada Buys seems to be pushing tenders from different cities and provinces now as well. So that is its intention, and so we'll see how it plays out over the next couple of years, how many provincial governments come onto it. It's in there. It's there. It's good for them to be on the platform. So hopefully we'll see that. But if you ever follow Canadian politics at all, it's also popular for the Canadian provinces to fight amongst themselves. So sometimes some provinces will choose to come and others will not. So that's a long answer to say, yes, you'll find everything for the federal government. For now, you can use it for awareness for other governments, but I wouldn't trust it as a 100% source for those other governments just yet.
And to go back to Alberto's question and to what Antonella was asking before, if there is someone in the Extra Light project that will be able to monitor what's happening on Canada's buy and on the different province system and for the big municipality as well, and do that work of consolidation and populate a database, I think that's the only way to do it and to be quite exhaustive. So if you want to build a strong database for Canada, you need to go after all those different platforms.
Definitely. And because of the separation of powers in Canada, it's very different what's happening at the provincial level. If you're looking to put lighting in all of our hospitals across Canada, it's every province is going to run those hospitals differently. And so it's completely different. But if you're looking at putting them in a federal government building, well, there's one process for all of Canada. So it's one thing that may help you in general, and I don't know if you're doing this in your webinars at all, is to look at the separation of powers in Canada. Look at what the responsibilities are under the federal government and look at what responsibilities are under the provincial and municipal governments. They're different than in other countries. I remember when I moved to France, I was like, oh, this is different. They're doing this way and this that way. And United States, same thing. So learn what the levels of government in Canada, what they are responsible for, and that will give you a better idea of where you need to focus your resources.
We've shared that. I've shared that on Tuesday and look at the different power. But the thing is, in the sector of lighting, and when it comes to construction, it's all over the place because so it's not a very clear cut, unfortunately. So you have no choice than looking at the different platforms.
Look at them all, and you can always start one by one too. Like you can always focus on one thing, focus on Canada buys to start, get good at that, and you can always add more after and branch out to other governments as well. Okay, all right. Well, as I mentioned, I will follow up later this afternoon with you, Jan. I'll send you an email with all of these notes. There's about 4 or 5 presentations I drew from, so I'll send you the notes to them. Feel free to share. They're on a public website. So you have the notes for the presentation and a few other bits of information that can help you. But other than that, I think that's it for me today.
I maybe just a last question.
Oh yeah,
about
go ahead.
The Ariba platform. Honestly, we already use the Ariba platform for payment with the HP because we have contract with HP. And now I look that we can use the same login and password for also the to login in the Canada Buys platform. There's a lot of empty field to fill out. Do you think it's mandatory to complete everything? Because very detailed, we ask many information about companies, about board of directors, and a lot of information about budgetary and so on about the companies. Or the general account is enough to have a look to to investigate in the Canada Buys platform.
So first of all, for Canada Buys, you don't have to be registered at all. So you're talking about SAP Ariba. So those are two different. So Canada Buys is the free site. Everybody can look. You don't have to be registered at all. SAP Ariba, you shouldn't be looking for opportunities in SAP Ariba. If you're there, you're only looking at a few of Canadian opportunities. They're not all being posted there. So I suggest not searching in SAP Ariba for Canadian opportunities. Use Canada Buys to search for Canada's opportunities.
Yeah, but
the only way you have to be registered in SAP Ariba in order to bid To actually bid, you have to be registered. If you're going to bid, I would suggest filling out every single field that you can put there. It's not mandatory. The more information you provide, the better it is for you, the more advantageous it is for you. So you don't have to, but the more you can fill out your company profile, I would do so. It's to your advantage. But you only have to have that to bid. You don't need to have that account if you're not going to bid yet. If you're just looking at opportunities, you don't have to have that account.
Okay, but my question is that related to the fact that we would like to, for sure, invite companies to bid, and why not? We are also wondering, as we are a network, we've registered the VAT number and official commercial number in Italy. We can evaluate maybe in future to bid directly as Luce and Veneto, because we are an official companies network, not just representative association for companies. So
yeah, you could register in there as an association. Like, you have to have a business. In order to be on Canada Buys, though, you need a PBN, you need a Canadian business number. Your account is already there, sure, but it's not linked to Canada Buys yet. You'll have to, that SAP Ariba account has to be registered for Canada Buys in order to be on Canada Buys. And in order to do that, they're going to ask you for your personal business information number from Canada. So, but you can just set up an account and have it in there, a blank account if you want. Like, I have one set up as a business. You can just go in and put your business in there. It's just you're not going to be able to bid onto anything until you have that business number that's there.
okay, thank you.
And if you run into any difficulty with that, with signing up for Canada Buys, there's that support page that's for the Canada Buys account. If you want to link your account that you already have or anything like that, there's a whole team of folks that can help you with your account.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Anything else before we wrap it up? Good.
Thank you once again.
Also,
Thank you, everyone. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.